Nations in ruins. More than 70 million dead. 2 world wars in a single generation. The unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust. And 72 territories still under colonialism. This was our world 80 years ago. A desperate world, grasping for any sign of hope. Courageous leaders gave that hope through our Charter of the United Nations. When signed on 26 June 1945, it was more than yet another empty political declaration. It was a promise from leaders to their people and from nations to one another that humanity had learned from its darkest chapters. It was a pledge not to deliver us to heaven, but to never again be dragged into hell by the forces of hatred and unchecked ambition. An acknowledgement that our failures came not from a lack of power, but from complacency. And the strong belief that our world could be better, that we could be better together. In the darkest moments of history, our grandmothers and grandfathers had the humility, grace, and I dare to say good sense to put aside their differences, their self-interest and their resentments, and to agree to work together. When faced with a crossroads, they chose the right path, the path of hope. But hope is not blind optimism. It's not the guarantee that everything will work out. It's a deep belief that we are doing the right thing, regardless of whether we succeed. Today, the hours indeed feel dark once again. We stand at a similar crossroads. We see children without parents searching for food in the ruins of Gaza, the ongoing war in Ukraine, sexual violence in Sudan, gangs terrorizing people in Haiti, unfiltered hatred online, and floods and droughts all over the world. Is this a world envisioned in our charter? Do we really need to relearn the hard lessons? Today is not about celebrating. It's about remembering those hard lessons and drawing on the courage to once again agree, to find hope instead of resignation, to find the spirit from 80 years ago once again, to choose the right path, not because of any guarantee, but because of the conviction that it's the right thing to do. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of States, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the artists, especially the young artists, for their wonderful performance, which have set the tone for our event. Today, as we mark 80 years of our United Nations, we are once again standing at a crossroads. We cannot take the easy path and simply give up. We have to choose the right path to show the world that we can be better together. Not because the last 80 years were perfect, not because for 80 years, because we have tried. For 80 years, this building has stood as a monument to our shared hopes for a better future. Yes, we have disagreed, we have struggled, but we have also triumphed. For 80 years, this institution has driven progress on sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. Today's commemoration is not the story of an institution. It's the story of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people who tried to turn hope in something real. The people who stood between war and peace and chose peace. The people who are risking their lives to deliver food in Gaza. The people who are supplying education materials to girls in Afghanistan. The people who not only wear the symbol of the United Nations, but are out there on the ground, showing how we are better together. This is why this is the theme of this 80th session, better together. It's more than a hot motto, it's a hard-won truth. It's our commitment for the next 80 years. Our commitment to not only hope for problems to vanish, but to find the courage to confront them. Better together means to act where action is hard, to choose dialogue and diplomacy when division is easier. Hope at this 80th anniversary means that this session is not remembered not only for its milestone year, but as a moment when we called on extraordinary resolve equal to the extraordinary challenges we face. We owe this to the people, to the men and women, boys and girls who are not giving up, even in the darkest hours of war, who look still to the streaming blue flag for hope, the flag of our United Nations. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. I now invite delegations to view a short film on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations entitled Better Together.
Chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
I give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, I invite you to return for a moment to our earliest days. When the organization first opened its doors, many of its staff bore visible wounds from war, a limp, a scar, a burn. One of them was Major Brian Urquhart, the second person to be hired by the UN. A British soldier during the Second World War. He had been blown up on a ship in the Channel. Witnessed the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp and carried for the rest of his life the limp from a parachute that failed to open. He was not alone. A clerk might quietly mention a bullet wound. A delegate, the shard of shrapnel still lodged in its chest. They had seen the worst of humanity, the horrors of the death camps, the cruelty of combat, cities entirely wiped out. And it was precisely because of what they had witnessed that they chose to serve peace. Excellencies, there is a persistent myth that peace is naive, that justice is sentimental, that the only real politics is the politics of power and self-interest. But those early staff were not idealists untouched by reality. They had seen war and they knew. Peace is the most courageous, the most practical, the most necessary pursuit of all. And in building the United Nations, they created something extraordinary, a place where all nations, large and small, could come together to solve problems that no country can solve alone. And yet, at this moment, the principles of the United Nations are under assault as never before. As we meet, civilians are targeted and international law trampled in Gaza, the Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. As we meet, poverty and hunger are on the rise as progress on the Sustainable Development Goals falters. As we meet, the planet burns with fires, floods, and record heat raging through climate chaos. And at the same time, we are moving towards a multipolar world, but without strong multilateral institutions, multipolarity has its risks, as Europe learned in the First World War. To meet these challenges, we must not only defend the United Nations, we must strengthen it. And that is the purpose of Agenda 2030, the Pact for the Future, and the UN80 initiative, to renew the foundations of international cooperation and to ensure that we can deliver for people everywhere. Excellences, au fil des
Excellencies, over the years, our organization has led the way to some of humanity's greatest triumphs. The eradication of smallpox, healing the ozone layer, and above all, the prevention of a third world war. The tests of the next 80 years will be both familiar and new. The battle will continue against war and poverty, but also climate chaos, runaway technologies, the militarization of space, and crises we cannot yet imagine. To meet these challenges, let us remember what our founders knew. The only way forward is together. Let us rise to this moment with clarity, courage, and conviction, and let us realize the promise of peace. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I have the honor now to give the floor to Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President of Liberia, 2011 Nobel Peace Laureate, and Africa's first elected female head of state, a champion of peace, justice, and democratic governments, a former United Nations staff member, and a steadfast voice for multilateralism.
Excellencies, Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, friends, I'm honored to address this high-level meeting on peace and security as part of the UN 80th anniversary. 80 years after the founding, we must recommit to the Charter, to our common security, to the belief that nations can choose dialogue over destruction. We begin in Africa, our shared cradle of resilience and hope, where democracy is weakening, where fractures across borders from Sudan to the Sahel to the Great Lakes strain our regional architecture. Yet, across Africa, communities stand up to extreme violence. Regional bodies mediate transitions, and women's groups negotiate truces when the state is distant and humanity is near. We have learned hard lessons. Prevention costs less than reconstruction. Reconciliation is a process, not an event. Peace agreements require institutions and citizens to be real. When guns fall silent, skills training, jobs, justice, and dignity must follow swiftly. Liberia's story illustrates UN-led progress and success. The largest peacekeeping force joined Africa's forces to disarm fighters, support elections, reform security institutions, and create space for reconciliation and growth. India's all-female formed police unit strengthened protection and public trust. The mission ended with Liberia standing on its own feet, out of war, into a fragile peace with accountability, inclusive dialogue, and economic opportunity for young people. We must acknowledge that the multilateral architecture built to shield future generations from war is underperforming. That global leadership lacks a unified effort to respond to a technological-enabled world. Commemoration without candor is unaffordable. The world asks whether this House will protect civilians and uphold international humanitarian law. These are not words of despair. They are summons to repair. Our answer must go beyond words. It must translate into actions felt by a family in a tent, a nurse in a clinic, a child in school. A call for change, a renewed vision of collective security, and a broader approach to the triple planetary crisis and worsening inequality. The call for the new design of a new vision, better together, must ensure immediate protection of civilians, finance for conflict prevention, proposals that pay real people, leaders who are audible and accountable, women at the table with budgets that guarantee their participation in all peace negotiation delegations, and the deep weaponization of the information space. None of this is beyond our reach. It demands humility to listen, courage to compromise, persistence to implement. Peace is not built only in conference rooms, but in classrooms where girls learn without fear, clinics where mothers deliver safely, markets where youth find dignified work, courts where law is fair, and in daily acts of neighborly coexistence. 80 years on, the United Nations founding generation would ask if we are still worthy of the hopes inherited. Our answer must be yes. Not because the world is less dangerous, but because our determination is stronger. Better together. Your theme, better together, your theme, it must be a strategy. Regional bodies and the UN working together. Civil society and governments co-designing solutions. Women and men sharing power equally. Truth and reconciliation traveling the same road. Let us leave this anniversary with concrete commitments, funded priorities, and a timetable for action. Show those in shelters, standing in the bread lines, and awaiting news of loved ones that the United Nations, as it celebrates its 80th year, remains a place of peace, a place of refuge, a place of unity, and a place of hope. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf for your strong and wise words. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway, former Director General of the World Health Organization, a medical doctor committed to health as a human right, and instrumental in placing sustainable development at the forefront of our international agenda.
Madam President, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to address you marking the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. I was born at the cusp of the World War II. My parents were both active in the resistance against the Nazi occupation of Norway, and we had to flee the country. Some of my earliest memories are from Sweden, where my parents worked for Norwegian refugees. And I grew up in a Europe where the ravages of war were still clearly visible, where millions carried terrible scars on their bodies and their souls. It is against this background that the UN was founded, not as a symbol, but as a solemn promise. A promise to equip humanity with legal and diplomatic tools to prevent wars of conquest and domination. A promise to enshrine universal human rights as a bulwark against totalitarianism, racism, and oppression. A promise to foster peace, development, and dignity for all people. So, Madam President, let me highlight two areas where the UN has made an undeniable difference that also are part of particular importance to me personally. First, sustainability. When Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar asked me to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development, I accepted with great humility. And I am very proud of the report we produced, Our Common Future. It helped cement the concept of sustainable development in our collective consciousness. Thanks to UN-led efforts, we started charting a path towards economic development that does not destroy the basis of life for future generations, our climate and our natural environment. But we are today exceeding the planet's boundaries and approaching tipping points where there is no way back. Over 80% of the targets under the Sustainable Development Goals are today off track. Second, President, gender equality. During the UN's International Year Women's Year in 1975, I had just entered government for the first time. Many of my male colleagues hardly knew how to deal with me. In 1979 came the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. In 1981, I became Prime Minister for the first time. In 1995, 30 years ago this month, I delivered my address at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing. I spoke of the moral and economic imperative to end gender apartheid. I believed too optimistically that we would have come further by now. I did not foresee the intensity of the pushback that would come. Even today, there are countries where not a single woman sits in the highest decision-making bodies, including among the P5. But despite such adversity, the UN has methodically worked to strengthen the position of women through education, through microfinance, through work for sexual and reproductive rights and health, and through intense and effective advocacy work. With resolve and determination, we will get there in the end. So, Madam President, I have lived longer than most of you. I have witnessed the tangible differences the UN makes through economic upturns and downturns, political ebbs and flows. I have no patience for those who dismiss the UN as outdated. We are going through a time of great geopolitical shifts and impressive, but also frightening, technological development. The UN as our common hub for getting the facts on the table, debating and deciding on solutions, and acting is more important than ever. We owe that not just to ourselves, but to the generations to come. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland for her blunt and powerful words. I have the honor now to give the floor to Ms. Maria Ressa, 2021 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, award-winning journalist, professor at Columbia University, co-founder of Rappler online news site, and a fearless defender of freedom of expression in the face of constant political harassment and arrests.
President Baerbock, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm normally chasing you here, and here I am. It's actually a very interesting place. Look, 80 years ago, this institution was born to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Never again, after fascism manipulated information, eroded truth, and dehumanized entire populations to enable genocide and global war. Today, we stand on the rubble of the world that was, and the challenge is to rebuild the United Nations for now, for this moment, when similar forces that led to those atrocities 80 years ago are now surging through digital platforms, insidiously manipulating us for power and profit. The biggest battle we face today is impunity, and it leads to our dehumanization in both the physical world, where wars rage from Ukraine to Gaza, and in the virtual world, where our minds and emotions are manipulated by surveillance capitalism for profit. To fight that, we need information integrity to remind us to be human. I became a journalist because information is power. But news groups lost our gatekeeping powers when an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem, a technological one that's silently destroying the very foundations the UN was built to protect. This is the deadliest period for journalists in recorded history. More than 240 journalists killed in Gaza alone. More than died in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the former Yugoslavia combined. This is unprecedented. They're targeted, and there must be accountability. We're living through an information Armageddon, where lies spread 6 times faster than facts on social media. That's a 2018 MIT study. It is so much worse today with generative AI. And the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problems, let alone the existential ones you heard from the speakers before me. We cannot have journalism, we cannot have electoral integrity, we cannot have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our countries. Algorithms reward outrage over empathy, spreading fear, anger, and hate, pumping us full of toxic sludge. Regulating technology isn't a free speech issue, it's about public safety. Because as has been proven time and time again, online violence is real-world violence. As a Filipino, I'm proud that my country was a charter member of the United Nations, one of only 3 Asian founding nations. Our commitment to multilateralism and peace runs deep. But that legacy was tested under the Duterte administration. Among the actions it took, it filed 11 criminal charges against me in a little over a year. Until today, I still need Supreme Court approval to be here. But I'm here. And my former president, well, he was arrested in March for alleged crimes against humanity and is detained at The Hague waiting for trial. Impunity ends. The rule of law, championed now by the Philippines as it chairs the 6th Committee on Legal Questions, ultimately prevailed. We moved to it. The trends are clear. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. As of March this year, VDEM said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. So we turn to you at the UN. It has its critics because you have to move faster. Security Council votes paralyze action on major crises. Outdated representation excludes rising powers. Bureaucratic processes respond too slowly to urgent threats. But as you know, the solution isn't to abandon multilateralism, it's to strengthen it by addressing the very impunity that undermines international law. At this time of creative destruction, I implore you to create. Here are 3 solutions. First, end big tech impunity through global accountability. We need binding standards for international to restore and regulate information integrity, just as we have for nuclear weapons and climate change. There are 2 new initiatives, first from the Vatican, created last weekend with His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, a declaration demanding artificial intelligence remain under human control with clear accountability mechanisms. The second one will be launched later today, a global call for AI red lines, which more than 200 of us have signed. We urge your governments to establish clear international boundaries to prevent universally unacceptable risks for AI, at the very least define what AI should never be allowed to do. Second, build alternative infrastructures for trust. It isn't just big tech that failed to protect the public in the virtual world. It's also you, the governments. At Rappler, we built a chat app using open source protocols. Countries that care about data privacy, France, Germany, all their government websites are on the Matrix protocol. It allows real people to talk to real people without manipulation. The vision is a global federation of trusted news organizations, because this is how journalism will survive and how we begin to build infrastructures of trust. Finally, the third one, create. Create, that's our word today. Invest in comprehensive solutions. Let your imagination run. 3 examples that's happening now. More than 3/4 of UN members now recognize Palestinian statehood, showing that international law can advance despite impunity. On gender, the Nobel Women's Initiative have pointed out, demonstrated that in nearly every conflict around the world, women are leading efforts for peace, defying displacement, patriarchy, gender apartheid, and militarized violence every day. And finally, on Wednesday, Demokrasya Siyempre, 20 nations will pledge to strengthen democratic institutions and fight for information integrity. More than 40 Nobel laureates we have gathered together to support this multilateral initiative led by the Global South. Information integrity is the mother of all battles. Win this, and we can win the rest. Lose this, and we lose everything. Please choose courage over comfort, facts over fiction, hope over fear. A lot has changed since the UN was created 80 years ago. But its values, peace, human rights, justice, rule of law, these are more essential today than ever. It is time to create again, to build better, together. Please act now, before it's too late. Thank you.
I thank Maria Ressa also for her very powerful words. I now invite Ms. Mariam Burka, United Nations Global Advocate for Peace and youth leader, whose work bridges art, activism, championing women's rights, youth empowerment, and peace building, to recite a poem.
The President, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, excellencies, good morning. Walking these halls, I realized that the United Nations was not built from harmony. It grew out of the ashes of war and the grief watered by the collective memory of what happens when dialogue and cooperation fails. Its foundation is not peace achieved, but peace pursued, fragile, imperfect, necessary, not just worth fighting for, but requiring a fight. And today, 80 years on, we gather to honor what has been achieved. Nations rebuilt, walls of division lowered, millions lifted by the shared will. But these are victories worth remembering, but the story is unfinished. The cracks in the foundation calls us to repair, to act, not to retreat. Our world bleeds before our eyes. Children in conflict zones, nations silenced by hunger and war. And it begs the question, are we witnessing the collapse of conscience in real time? Because behind every pact, there are people. Behind every statistic, there is a story. And behind every commitment that we sign, there are lives depending on whether we honor our words or not. And so this is not the time to feel powerless, because yes, hope and despair can coexist in the same breath, because healing is not linear. The United Nations is not a monument, it is a mirror, and it reflects what we have dared to imagine 80 years ago, and today, here, it asks, will we dare again? Will we dare to work better together? Because if the past proves that we can build peace from ashes, then the present demands that we build it again, louder, braver, together. I speak as a global peace advocate, not because peace is easy, but because silence is complicity, and so I will not be silent. You know, I used to think that peace was a place, a final destination we arrive at after all wars have ended. But I have come to understand that peace is not a line that we cross. It is a choice that we make over and over and over again, especially when it is the hardest, especially when it feels far away. Peace is not a silence we force into people's mouths. It is not the absence of war, but the presence of understanding. Peace is a child learning to sleep again without flinching at the wind. It is a mother not having to choose between bread and dignity. It is a father not having to swallow his voice to feel like a man. Peace is messy, like forgiveness. It does not arrive in parade floats. Sometimes it comes crawling through broken windows when we finally agree that being right is not better than being whole. Peace is not found, it is built, brick by brutal brick, by hands that once knew how to fight, now choose to hold instead. There was a time when we measured strength by how long we could hold a grudge. But today, let us measure strength by how long we could hold space for someone else's truth. Because there was a me and a you before there was ever an us. And if us is broken, then peace is what lets us lay down the shards without aiming at each other's throats. Peace is the poem you write after the war in your chest has finally run out of ink. It is the moment you return to your body and find yourself still standing. Peace is not easy. And so let us not forget the ones who have carried peace quietly through the fire. The women whose hands mend what war has torn, who rebuild homes from memory, raise children between checkpoints, hold their families like nations, because peace has always known the name of a woman, carried through the way that she chooses courage over collapse again and again. And so today I speak peace into the bones of this world, into the rubble, into the rage, into the ruins. Because if war teaches us how to shatter, then peace must teach us how to stay soft, to stay human. And perhaps what makes us human is not that we always succeed in peace, but that we dare again and again to seek it, refusing to let our brokenness be the end of our story. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Burkhan, and as we conclude and after listening to this beautiful poem, let me emphasize again, peace is only a word and better together is only a slogan until we embrace it. So I invite you to embrace and live up to be better together over this 80th session.
This is not the story of an institution. It's the story of people. People who stood between war and peace and chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
Before adjourning this meeting, I would like to remind delegation that the high-level meeting on the 30th anniversary of Fourth World Conference on Women will begin immediately in this hall. Delegations are therefore requested to remain seated while the stage is being prepared for the next meeting. The high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations has concluded. I thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Distinguished delegates, please take your seats. We are going to start now. Please take your seats.
Good morning to those of you who just came into the room, and good to see the others again after our anniversary session. The high-level meeting of the General Assembly on the 30th anniversary of the First World Conference on Women is called to order. Heads of state and government, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants. I warmly welcome all of you to this high-level meeting convened to mark the 30th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women and to renew our resolve to fully implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. This high-level meeting is held on the theme Recommitting to, Resourcing and Accelerating the Implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 79/288 of 7th May 2025. Allow me now to make a statement as President of the General Assembly.
Please take your seats, distinguished delegates.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights, once and for all. When these famous words were spoken by Hillary Clinton 30 years ago in Beijing, they were revolutionary. But if our daughters heard this today, wouldn't they rather think, why would women's rights not be human rights? Our daughters who are the fastest sprinter in their high school, our daughters who are CEO of an AI startup, our daughters who have watched their mothers become the first female president of the Marshall Islands, of Namibia, North Macedonia, Peru, of Slovenia or Suriname. All presidents joining us here today. For so many of you, of us here in this room, we hold these positions that when we ourselves were young seemed unattainable, but are now almost normal for the next generation. Because we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of women who paved the way forward also for us, towards a world in which our daughters today regard women's rights, our human rights, as a simple fact, not as something revolutionary. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, feminist leaders, ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate the courageous women who fought for every single phrase, for every single word in the Beijing Declaration. Their fight paid off. The Beijing Declaration was a watershed achievement advancing women's rights, resources, and representation. As Mama Mongella, how she was called, stated in 1995, a revolution has begun. There's no going back. Yet, 30 years later, the revolution remains unfinished. when the phrase, "she runs like a girl," is hailed as an insult, when highly qualified CEOs are called diversity hires, when a female world leader is attacked on social media not for the speech she gave, but for the wrong high heels she wore. That is when we remember how far we still have to go. There's no country in the world where women's rights are fully equal to men. And there are still too many places where even speaking about women's rights is a matter of life and death. Just weeks ago in Afghanistan, after the deadly earthquake, women and girls were left trapped in rubble as male rescuers were forbidden from touching them. As one survivor said, "Being a woman here means we are always the last to be seen." We see this also in Sudan, where the brutal civil war between two generals is literally being fought over women's bodies. I still have her voice in my ear when one mother told me, while I was sitting with her in a refugee camp, that she wishes that they all would have been simply killed instead of having to see her daughters being raped over and over again. This year alone, demand for life-saving post-rape support in Sudan increased almost 4 times. And this is no exception. 1 in 3 women globally will experience sexual violence at some point in her lifetime. 1 out of 3. This is us. And these battles extend to family planning. UNFPA estimates that today a quarter of women are unable to make decisions about their own health care, and roughly half of all pregnancies are unintended. Delivering on Beijing, on this revolution, means also that no male politician, judge or religious leader should dare to tell our girls what to do with their bodies, because they are human beings, not property. It's our body, our choice. In this regard, I'm honored we are joined by our first guest speaker, Cecilia Suarez, who is using her platform to speak out against this scourge in Latin America and the Caribbean, affecting as many as 76% of women in the region. But even in the darkest hours, women are not victims. They are survivors. They are heroes. And it's an extreme honor that we will also hear from our guest speaker, Nadia Murad, Nobel laureate, a hero who not only survived the unthinkable crimes of ISIS, but gave Yazidi women a voice, and by that defeated a terrorist organization. Women like Nadia Murad remind us that women's rights are not only human rights, but human rights are the best weapon for peace. Excluding women peace builders doesn't just reduce the possibility of peace, it undermines its very foundation and longevity. Therefore, we are celebrating today not only Beijing, but also 25 years of Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Excellencies, Beijing and Resolution 1325 promised not only rights, but also resources. And there, the revolution has barely begun. At the current rate, reaching economic equality will take 123 years. But women's economic empowerment is not just about doing a favor for women, but a favor for every society, every economy. As they say, it's economics, stupid. Closing the gender gap would increase global GDP by $7 trillion US. Which brings us to the third R, representation. We all know that when women are at the table, companies perform better, peace treaties last longer, and governments deliver more. Their presence is power. Yet, in this hall of principles, last year, fewer than 10% of speakers during high-level week were women. And out of all 80 presidents of the General Assembly, I'm only the 5th woman. Not even speaking about the Secretary General, where in 80 years we have never had a female SG. This is not just This is, as we can hear, not just a matter of representation, it's a matter of credibility, to practice what we preach. But it's not only who is leading, it is how we lead. Leadership means collaboration. The theme of this 80th session overall is better together. A motto which also guided Beijing, where so many women came together in networks like Femnet, led by Memory Kachamba, a guest speaker here also today. Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate this spirit of better together and the courage of the women who paved the path to Beijing and beyond. But tomorrow we go back to work. As female presidents, as male presidents, as Olympic sprinters, as CEOs, as ordinary mothers and daughters. And just in case, while finishing the revolution from Beijing, we might hear that contemptuous phrase, "you'll run like a girl," we should remember what little girls all around the world would do. Exactly that. Proudly run like a girl, fast as hell, even in high heels, showing that women's rights are always human rights, that they are our rights, our future. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to make a statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, dear friends, 30 years ago, the world came together to affirm that the rights of women and girls are not separate, secondary, or negotiable. They are human rights. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is the most ambitious global political commitment on women's rights ever achieved. And it has helped to power advances in some critical areas: legal protection, political participation, education, maternal mortality, recognizing the need to tackle violence against women as a global priority, and more. But progress has been slow and uneven, and no nation has achieved full equality for women and girls. Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality, is lagging far behind. Hard-won gains are now under attack. Meanwhile, conflicts and climate disasters are multiplying, and the human rights of women and girls are casualties of both. Cultural and structural barriers remain entrenched, and technology is spreading hate like a virus. A wave of misogyny is rolling across the world. Let us be clear. Equal rights and opportunities are not partisan issues. They are global imperatives and the foundation of peace, prosperity, and progress. Excellencies, dear friends, in every region, every country, every community, women and girls are fighting for their rights, demanding freedoms, combating abusive practices, rallying for legal protections, and organizing to take their rightful place at the table in decision-making and peace processes. And the United Nations stands with them. All leaders should do the same, by speaking out for the rights of women and girls, by making clear that tradition cannot excuse oppression, and by doing everything possible to realize the vision of the Beijing Declaration. Excellencies, dear friends, earlier this year, countries took an important step forward. The Commission on the Status of Women adopted a new political declaration committing to implement the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action fast and in full. So now all countries must live up to that responsibility. We need strong, visible support at the highest levels and concrete plans backed by real investment to support women's organizations, services, and solutions, to deliver the Beijing Plus 30 action agenda, to advance socio-economic empowerment, to defend women's rights, and to confront a challenge that was barely imagined 3 decades ago. Artificial intelligence is reshaping our world, but the transformation is unfolding in an industry dominated by men, shaped by biased data, and driven by algorithms that frequently reinforce discrimination. We must confront violence and online hate and ensure that technology serves equality, not exclusion. And that includes a priority in investing in women and girls' education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Because women's participation in decision-making on this issue and every other, it is not a gift, it is a right. It strengthens societies, enriches debate, and boosts equality across the board. We must remove systematic obstacles to equality for women and girls. From discrimination to unequal pay and inequality before the law, we need universal ratification of the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. Excellences,
Excellencies, lastly, we need proactive steps to bring women into decision-making at every level. Here at the United Nations, through a dedicated effort, we have achieved and maintained gender parity among the senior leadership.
On these. Some think that we had to bend the rules in favor of women to reach parity. Totally wrong. The only thing we did was to guarantee that there was effective equality opportunities for women and men, and that the selection processes had not a misogynist bias. And the result was parity at the level of the high direction of the United Nations. Nous poursuivons nos efforts.
We will keep working to reach gender parity across the organization, and our Gender Equality Acceleration Plan charts our path forward. Your Excellencies, 80 years ago, the United Nations Charter affirmed the equal rights of women and men. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration declared women's rights as human rights. In this hall today, we need to hear how you will make those ambitions a reality. Let us hear your commitments. Let us see your plans. Let us deliver together the equality for women and girls that our world so sorely needs. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I now invite Her Excellency Huang Shouwei, Deputy Head of the National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China, as host of the 4th World Conference on Women, to make a statement.
Distinguished Madam President, distinguished colleagues, China commends the General Assembly for convening this meeting to mark the 30th anniversary of the Beijing World Conference on Women. Just as what Madam President stated, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action for Women has a milestone kind of significance. It is a source of wisdom and strength, and it continues to provide a blueprint for action that continues to guide global efforts towards gender equality. Over the past 3 decades, the World Conference on Women has been a catalyst for tremendous change, from advancing legal reforms to expanding social services, from empowering women to enhancing their participation. Countries have made notable strides toward gender equality. Countless women have undergone profound transformations, moving from silence to voice, from the margins to the center, and from dependence to independence. These achievements testify to the foresight and enduring vitality of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Gender equality is not only a human right, but also a powerful driver of sustainable development. For the past 30 years, as host of the Beijing Conference on Women, China has honored its commitments through concrete action. Under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, China has steadfastly advanced gender equality as a fundamental national policy, implemented 4 successive cycles of the National Program for Women's Development, and built a comprehensive legal framework of more than 100 laws and regulations to safeguard women's rights and interests. With measurable and effective institutional mechanisms, China has significantly strengthened women's empowerment in the fields of economy, health, education, employment, political participation, and social protection, benefiting 690 million women. Chinese women, with their creativity, continue to hold up half the sky in the nation's progress. China has consistently championed the advancement of women around the world. In partnership with the United Nations, China established the Prize for Girls and Women's Education, with Professor Peng Liyuan, spouse of President Xi Jinping, serving as special envoy. China has trained more than 200,000 female professionals from over 180 countries and regions, and has carried out empowerment projects totaling over $40 million in more than 20 countries. The Global Center for Digital Empowerment of Women, established by China, offers a new platform to help bridge the digital gender divide and to promote women's meaningful participation in AI development. Distinguished Madam President, colleagues, at present, this century's profound transformation is accelerating, and the global governance stands at a critical crossroads. Nearly 10% of women remain trapped in extreme poverty. More than 600 million women lived amid conflict, and violence against women, discrimination, and economic inequality continue. developing countries face an annual funding gap of $420 billion for gender equality. These challenges call for urgent, more proactive, and pragmatic action. Chinese President Xi Jinping's proposal for global governance initiative comes at a critical juncture. Advancing gender equality and the full development of women requires strengthened international cooperation, accelerated action, and sustained commitments. At this new starting point, China calls for the following: continued advancement of the equal development of women. Safeguarding women's rights and interests should be elevated as a national priority and embedded as a social norm. The allocation of resources to this end should be increased to ensure women's equal access to opportunities and their full participation. Continued empowerment of women in innovation and development. Quality education for women and girls should be provided. Digital technologies should be harnessed to strengthen their capabilities, support their leadership, and unlock their innovative potential. Continue to promote the shared development of women worldwide. All countries should uphold genuine multilateralism and fully leverage the vital role of the UN, deepen South-South cooperation and North-South dialogue, and expand financial and technical support for developing countries, leaving no woman or girl behind. Distinguished Madam President, dear colleagues, gender equality is not only a matter for women, but a cornerstone of human progress and human civilization. Let us remain true to our original aspirations and mission, continue to translate the blueprint of the Beijing Declaration and platform for action into tangible results, and work together to build a community with a shared future for all. I look forward to welcoming you at the Global Summit on Women in Beijing. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Head of the National Working Committee on Children and Women of the State Council of China. I now invite Ms. Sima Bahous, Executive Director of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Majesties, ministers, excellencies. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action changed the world. It brought the UN Charter's principles and promises to life for women and girls. Human rights, dignity, equality. To this day, the Beijing Declaration remains the most visionary, groundbreaking, and far-reaching global agenda for gender equality and women's rights. And it has delivered. Today, girls are far more likely to finish school than any other moment in history. Maternal deaths have nearly halved. The number of women in parliament has more than doubled, and nearly every country has laws to end violence against women and girls. And in just the last 5 years alone, nearly 100 discriminatory laws have been reversed. Every step forward was hard-won by feminist movements, by governments, by the multilateral system, and every step forward proved the same truth: gender equality works. But progress has not been fast enough, wide enough, or deep enough, and in too many places it is being reversed. On our current path, 351 million women and girls will still live in extreme poverty by 2030. And today, 676 million women and girls live within reach of deadly conflict, the highest recorded since the 1990s. Women and girls in crises suffer unspeakable atrocities, hunger and violence from Afghanistan, the DRC, Gaza, the Sudan, Ukraine, to Yemen and beyond. Women and girls bear the brunt of crisis. We owe it to them to spare no effort in the pursuit for peace. Excellencies, the very systems built to advance and fund gender equality are being hollowed out quietly but deliberately. This is not just regression, it is retreat. But the future is not fixed. Another path is still possible. Excellencies, as we commemorate 80 years of the United Nations and 30 years since the Beijing Declaration, 2025 must be our turning point. This is why, in this pivotal year, we asked governments to recommit with bold, measurable actions across a roadmap of 6 priority areas. And you answered. 108 governments have stepped forward with 196 national actions on the Beijing Plus 30 action agenda. You are investing in care systems, strengthening gender data, and funding women peace builders on the front lines. You are putting power, protection, and possibility in the hands of women and girls. You are harnessing technology and innovation to advance, not hinder, equality. And you are enacting laws to protect women and girls from violence. Your actions reflect partnerships with feminist movements who have carried this agenda through times of backlash and breakthrough alike. Importantly, your actions prioritize the leadership and voice of adolescent girls and women. These actions form a map of the possible. And we know what that possible can deliver when we come together. Just this past week, you took another step forward together when you adopted by consensus the resolution to revitalize the Commission on the Status of Women, a timely legacy of Beijing Plus 30. I applaud you for this. This is multilateralism at its best. Excellencies, your words today must be matched by courage tomorrow, in the policies you pass, in the budgets you allocate, and the change you drive together with and for women. Because gender equality remains a unifying force for the world. Let history remember 2025 as the year we stood our ground for ceasefires, for peace, for justice, for equal rights, for sustainable development, and for prosperity for all women, for all girls, for all humanity. I thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women. I now invite Ms. Dean Kaita, Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, to make her statement.
Mr. Secretary General, Madam President, Excellencies, esteemed colleagues. 30 years ago, in Beijing, the world pledged to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. 1 year earlier, at the International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, government affirmed that sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights are a precondition for women empowerment and essential to dignity and development. Population, sexual reproductive health and right, and gender equality are inextricably linked. Beijing and Cairo go hand in hand, mutually reinforcing and universal. Today, we gather not only to commemorate, but also to thank the member states for their effort. While significant progress has been made, it is fragile. Too many women still die giving birth. Too many women and girls are denied safety and opportunity. Millions of youth and marginalized people do not have their most basic needs met. And new threats are rising: climate change, increasing conflict, digital world where technology, including artificial intelligence, can be fabulous opportunities when used properly, instead of being weaponized against women and girls. Demographic shifts are reshaping societies. Rapid population growth in some regions, aging in others, rising migration. Systems are strained, inequalities deepen, reproductive rights come under threat. Excellences, je m'adresse à vous.
Excellencies, I address you today as the new Executive Director of UNFPA. I take on this responsibility with humility and determination. I am determined to protect what has been achieved and to stand up for human rights and to go further together so that the promises made in Beijing and Cairo are finally upheld. The United Nations Population Fund is at your side, alongside the partners in the United Nations, civil society, and particularly women's organizations and networks as they continue their tireless work to promote the rights and choices of women and girls in all their diversity. UNFPA's contribution to these efforts is unique. As a public health and population agency, we work to ensure that every woman and girl can live free from violence and decide freely on her future. Sexual and reproductive health and rights are the foundation of equality in our society, the best investment in the better, fairer world envisioned in the 2030 Agenda.
Beijing and Cairo with urgent action. Under our Secretary General leadership, we look forward to delivering as one with our sister agency on the ground. Let us recommit to do better together and make sure that no woman should die while giving life. Let's invest in rights and choices, the foundation of justice, prosperity, and peace. Merci.
Merci. I thank the Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund. I now invite Ms. Hala Haidar, Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, to make her statement.
Madam President of the GA, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 30 years after Beijing, it must be said loud and clear, gender equality is not a favor. It's not optional. It is justice, peace, and progress for all humanity. Beijing gave us a powerful blueprint. It mandated the world to tackle 12 urgent areas: poverty, education, violence, decision-making, among others. And it transformed global policies. We have made gains: stronger laws against gender-based violence, more girls in schools, and a growing recognition that women's rights are human rights. But let us be honest. We are at a crossroad. Around the world, we witness a backlash against women's human rights, their underrepresentation in decision-making, online abuse, and discrimination against women being coded into new technologies. Moreover, we are horrified by the impact of conflict on women and girls. This is why CEDAW, the committee and the convention, matters more than ever. Beijing gave us the vision. CEDAW gives us the compass. The convention is legally binding. It holds states to account and measures progress and turns promises into rights that cannot be taken away. CEDAW covers every Beijing priority, defends women's economic rights, access to resources, calls for education, a force of transformation, places gender-based violence against women at the center of its concern and demands action. It advances women's voice in peace and security processes, and in that regard, CEDAW has just published an addendum on WPS. And with General Recommendation number 40 on the equal and inclusive representation of women in decision-making system, whose elaboration was supported by a large number of member states, it sets a bold roadmap for 50-50 parity in decision-making, not some distant day, but now. CEDAW is not a bystander. It's a driving force. It is addressing many emerging issues faced by women and girls in conflict, online abuse, stereotypes, and the gendered impacts of climate change. So today, let us stand together and say we will not go back. We will not allow the progress of the past 30 years to be undone. We will renew our commitments, demand accountability, and keep pushing until every woman and girl can live in freedom, equality, and dignity. Beijing gave us the blueprint. CEDAW gives us the compass. Today, as we celebrate Beijing Plus 30, I call on every government, in every institution, and every one of us. Let us turn today's momentum into a movement. Let us act united, boldly, urgently, until equality is no longer a dream, but the lived reality of every woman and girls everywhere. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. I now invite Ms. Claudia Flores, chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, to make a statement.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, it is an honor to join you in my capacity as chair of the UN Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. Thank you for including the working group in this landmark discussion. As we reflect on and reaffirm the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have both an opportunity but also a responsibility. We celebrate the gains of the last 30 years, recognizing that these victories, above all, belong to the brave women and girls human rights defenders who have pressed forward in the face of great restraints and risk. We also acknowledge the important progress achieved by member states in partnership with diverse stakeholders. As it marks its 15th anniversary, the working group has seen meaningful strides, from laws ensuring equal participation in public life, to reforms dismantling discrimination in family and cultural life, to new investments expanding women's and girls' economic rights. These advances demonstrate what is possible when states commit systematically to equality in all of its dimensions. Yet, we must also confront the reality that alongside this progress, and perhaps in response to it, a troubling wave of backlash threatens women and girls' rights worldwide, including challenges to the very concept of gender as the social and cultural norms and power relations we have built around sex. We see retrogressive narratives and policies designed to restrict rights and divide movements for dignity and equality. These are not abstract debates. They are concrete harms with grave costs for women and girls. In our most recent response, the working group, together with 30 independent mandate holders, issued a joint statement reaffirming the centrality of gender to the protection of human rights. Today, I urge states to act with determination to preserve international consensus and protect hard-won gains for women and girls. At the same time, we also recognize that these moments of challenge can be moments of opportunity. The working group remains committed to supporting states and stakeholders in advancing substantive gender equality as articulated in CEDAW. This year, through its forthcoming report on artificial intelligence and through the CREATE framework presented in its latest guidance, this framework offers a holistic and inclusive pathway to counter the gender backlash and to foster the transformation needed for a global community truly rooted in human dignity. Excellencies, while we celebrate the achievements of member states, civil society, the United Nations, all who are gathered here, we must also confront urgently and honestly what it will take to achieve gender equality. We can't afford another 30 years of effort only to see progress unravel. What is needed now is investment and political will to hold the line, the clarity to find ways forward amidst mounting challenges, and the integrity to trust women and girls as they continue to lead the way. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls. I now invite Ms. Reem Al-Salem, Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences, to make her statement.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action, the BDPA, gave the world a visionary blueprint that recognized the structural, societal, and individual causes of violence against women and their consequences. Today, as we commemorate its anniversary, we must recommit to its promise with honesty and courage. That starts with returning to the original intent of the BDPA, not diluted, not reinterpreted, and to implementing it comprehensively and not superficially. Let me highlight 6 commitments that are especially urgent and pertinent today. First, we must reaffirm women's inherent dignity and humanity. The BDPA mentions dignity 7 times and humanity 5 times, reminding us that women are not a subset, but are half of humanity. Yet today, those words have vanished from our policy language as though women's most basic worth and rights could be set aside. If we lose the language of dignity and humanity, we lose the foundation of equality. Second, we must reclaim the material reality of being female. The BDPA references the term sex or a derivative of it 176 times, recalling that all major human rights instruments prohibit discrimination on that basis. And yet, 3 decades later, the architects of the BDPA would be in disbelief to learn that stating this truth is branded by some as hateful, outdated, and regressive. Third, we must confront the rampant commodification and objectification of women and girls. Their bodies, their sexuality, and even reproductive functions have been turned into products for the sale and purchase, creating patriarchal entitlements and control, both online and offline. The BDPA was gravely and rightly concerned with this exploitation, particularly of prostitution and trafficking for sexual exploitation, and urged states to prosecute those who profit from it. Today, we must finally heed that call. Fourth, the BDPA identified aggression, colonialism, and foreign occupation as causes of grave violations, ethnic cleansing, genocide that fall within cruelty on women and girls. While governments stand idly by, women and girls, particularly in Palestine and in Afghanistan, are being intentionally and systematically targeted and destroyed. These atrocities and the impunity granted to their perpetrators expose the profound hypocrisy of governments who claim to defend women's rights while turning a blind eye to their annihilation. Fifth, the BDPA demanded accountability. But instead of an increased access to justice, we are seeing the opposite, on several fronts undermining rights hard won. Perpetrators of rape, trafficking, war crimes, and genocide walk free, flaunting their impunity while some governments boast of their support to them. And finally, the BDPA warned against excessive military spending, recognizing that militarization fuels violence against women while draining resources from peace, women empowerment, and ending violence, as well as social justice. Yet today, the global arms race intensifies, leaving women and girls to pay a hefty price. Excellencies, 30 years ago, states believed this agenda was achievable. If this was possible then, it is possible now, not as an act of charity, but as a necessity and undeniable right for women, for half of humanity. That half is watching, and that half will hold you to account. Thank you.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and consequences. I now invite Cecilia Suarez, UN Global Advocate for the Spotlight Initiative, to make her statement.
Good morning, Madam President, Secretary General, Excelencias, amigos. Nos reunimos como
Excellencies, friends, we meet this month as every year to take a look at the world that we live, a complex world without a doubt, among multiple armed conflicts, a full-scale genocide, and an increasingly severe climate crisis, and an unstoppable advance of technology without a clear legal framework or a transparent one. And as each September, we return to a topic that brings us together, the equality of that women and girls continue to demand throughout our planet. Today, with the radical urgency that shows that a policy of omission would mean for millions of women and girls in every part of the world a step backwards. It's not a surprise for anyone that global investment in gender equality is inadequate as a small part of global budgets. The numbers demonstrated. Just in 2025, the combat for gender equality shows a budgetary deficit of $420 billion. In contrast, the global investment in military expenditures is $2.7 trillion. $2.718 trillion that invested in war compared to over 400 billion deficit in gender equality. In other words, the world prefers to invest 6 times more in preparing for a conflict rather than investing in upholding and promoting the rights of half of the population. This is how the economies are built. So the obvious question is, what have we more normalized that turns out that promoting the means of war is more important than promoting the rights of women? How long we will continue to think that we will be allowed to live as second-class citizens? It might be a naive question. The war is a business, of course. But it's also important to invest in what is maintaining half of the world population far from achieving their full potential within our societies, and in turn restricting the growth of society as a whole. And we will repeat it again. This gap must be understood as something that oppresses and afflicts only women. But that is a mistake. Let's ask ourselves, what does a man truly lose when he is indoctrinated in the apparent privilege granted to him by his masculinity? What we see is that what is missing is doubt, fragility, truth, the ability to feel. I can also mention that 90% of organizations working in favor of women have seen very harsh budgetary cutbacks. The situation is critical. So I will be very concrete. What we need are resources, reforms, and leadership. The Spotlight Initiative has demonstrated with its mechanisms, programs, and legal frameworks that it is possible to obtain positive and concrete results in this fight. What is required is leadership from those who are gathered here. Leadership that fosters reforms and that with facts makes it possible to truly invest in the fight for equality, with actions rather. And lastly, to those who are skeptical, I will ask, do you really believe that our passage, our presence in this world is truly worth investing in destruction instead of investing in efforts that make us all progress together? Thank you.
I thank Ms. Suarez, and now I invite Ms. Memorio Kanshamba, Executive Director of the African Women's Development and Communication Network, to make a statement.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, thank you for this opportunity to speak at this occasion. I stand before you not as a one voice, but many that carry the breath of African women and girls, from the mountains of Kilimanjaro to the shores of Dakar, the streets of Harare, and the villages of Mali. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration, lit a flame. Women and girls danced. We sang together. The moment was not only symbolic, it was sacred. It was a covenant. And yes, there has been progress in the areas that Your Excellencies eloquently discussed and share on care work, gender-responsive budgeting, on women, peace and security, on the girl child, and climate justice. But let us be honest, even though this has entered the discourse has not delivered. There's been persistent and deliberate gaps, particularly the chronic underfunding of national gender institutions and the many sectors that shape our lives: health, education, agriculture, livelihoods, as well as public service provision. We have seen the erosion of women's organizing and feminist movements. We have seen reversals of hard-won gains and rights undermining our demands and struggle. We African women and girls demand bold, transparent, and participatory accountability. We insist on inclusion of women and girls in all their diversity. Civil society is not the enemy of the state. We are co-creators of development. We are guardians of democracy. We are the architects of liberation. The backlash that we face is not just against gender equality. It's against the truth. It is against freedom. It's against the principles upon which these institutions celebrating 80 years has been founded. We must affirm feminist principles that offer real alternatives to the broken system. Ubuntu, our shared humanity and interdependence, reparative justice for colonialization, debt, and climate harm. Africa each year loses close to 60 billion through illicit financial flows. These are funds and resources that can make a huge impact on women's rights and gender equality. Your Excellency, we also face a lot on our peace as a continent, on the dignity, on the extraction that we see of critical resources in the name of advancing climate transition. We see systematic violence. 80 years of the United Nations, we must not still be debating the relevance of gender equality and women's rights. Not in this generation, not after 30 years of Beijing, not after decades of the struggle. Women and girls deserve a life free of violence, free from the misogyny, free from the technology-facilitated violence that we see. Women and girls deserve to live and to thrive in dignity and joy. UNGA 80 must rise to this moment of reckoning and make bold, unapologetic resolve to fund gender equality and women's rights. It is non-negotiable. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Kachamba. I now invite Ms. Nadia Murad, Nobel Peace Laureate and founder of Nadia's Initiative, to make her statement.
Thank you, Madam President, for your commitment to advancing the rights of women and girls globally. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago in Beijing, the world declared that women's rights are human rights. Today we gather not only to reflect on that promise, but to ask, are we truly fulfilling it? Progress has been made, more women in parliaments, in classrooms, in leadership. But we're also at a dangerous crossroads. Around the world, democracy is weakening, extremism is rising, and women's rights are under attack. Nowhere is this more visible than in conflict-affected and crisis-affected areas. Millions of women and girls denied the right to education, targeted with sexual violence, or forced into early marriage. Behind these injustices are human lives, mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends, families destroyed, futures stolen. I was once a young woman living in peace until ISIS captured me and countless other women and girls, shattering our lives in unimaginable ways. Hundreds of these women and girls, including my niece, my sister-in-law, and my cousins, are still missing in captivity in Syria. Since my escape, I have met many women who endured unimaginable suffering and whose strength is extraordinary. But strength alone cannot rebuild lives. They need action, they need justice, they need resources. And yet, women's organizations, the lifeline in times of crisis, remain underfunded and excluded. Perpetrators of sexual violence continue to enjoy impunity. Equally urgent, the international community must hold accountable regimes, groups, and governments that deny women and girls the rights, those that legalize child marriage, restrict education, or enact discriminatory laws. Justice must extend beyond individuals to the system and structures that perpetuate inequality. If we are serious about the Beijing Platform for Action, then we must do three things. Fund the women's organizations on the front lines, guarantee women's full participation in peace and security, hold perpetrators and oppressive systems accountable, because impunity should never be an option. These are not just policies, they are promises we owe it to every woman and girl. Sustainable peace is impossible while half of humanity's population is silenced or targeted with violence. 30 years after Beijing, reflection is not enough. We must accelerate. The next generation of women and girls deserve to inherit no more promises, but the reality of equality, justice, and dignity. Thank you.
I thank Nadia Murad, and with the wise words from her, we have just heard the last speaker for the opening segment of this high-level meeting. I thank all our eminent speakers once again for their participation and insightful interventions, and maybe we have applause for all of the speakers again. Heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates, distinguished participants. We shall now hear statements in the plenary segment in accordance with paragraphs 1 and 3b of General Resolution 79/288. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to inform delegations that we have a very, very, very long list of inscriptions, which shows the commitments. But in order to enable the high-level meeting to hear from as many delegations as possible in the limited time, all speakers are requested to adhere to the 3-minute time limit for statements in the national capacity and 5 minutes for statements made on behalf of a group of states. Delegations are advised that the limit for time statement will be strictly enforced, and I would like to underline that. The microphones will be automatically muted once the speaking time has elapsed. Having said this, I would appeal to all speakers to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to facilitate interpretation into the 6 official languages of the United Nations, and have always a look at the little clock in front of you. Having said that, it's my dear honor to give now the floor to our first speaker of the high-level meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly on the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Jennifer Gerling-Simons, President of the Republic of Suriname.
Excellencies, it is with great honor and responsibility that I stand here as the first female president of the Republic of Suriname and also the first member state speaking today as we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women. This historic occurrence in my country has not only cracked the glass ceiling, but more importantly paved the way for particularly girls to dream about something that was perceived uncommon only about 3 decades ago. Today, we celebrate the work and advocacy of many pioneers at both political and intergovernmental levels in bringing the cause of women's empowerment and gender equality to the center of the global agenda. Madam President, as I pause to reflect of the role of women in Suriname, I can conclude that women of my country historically have always been on the forefront in the fight for freedom, justice, and economic development. Suriname remains committed to the Beijing Declaration and has made gradual progress in strengthening legislation, advancing gender-sensitive policies, and implementing programs to address persistent inequalities. Persistent challenges such as economic disparities, gender-based violence, and underrepresentation of women in leadership. These must be addressed with renewed urgency and vigor. We also face new and have to address new challenges, like the negative influence of social media on the self-image of many girls and young women. In closing, Madam President, Suriname reaffirms its unwavering commitment to advancing the rights, empowerment, and full participation of women and girls in every aspect of life. As a priority action, my government commits to further improve access to STEM education for girls and the protection of women and girls against gender-based violence. Advancing gender equality means progress in achieving sustainable development for all. Working as equals, living as equals, as women and men, we are better together. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, and again, congratulations for being the first of your kind, the first female president of Suriname. Congratulations. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Karen Keller-Sutter, President of the Swiss Confederation.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remains our collective compass to achieve gender equality, because gender equality is not an option. It is a universal human right and a catalyst for economic development. Despite the progress made, we still face serious challenges, including in Switzerland. First and foremost, violence against women remains an unacceptable reality. The wage gap persists, largely because working mothers are not fully integrated into the labor market, and because women are still underrepresented in leadership roles. 30 years after Beijing, our goals remain unchanged. Switzerland has taken concrete steps to implement the rights enshrined in our Constitution and in our international commitments. Our national strategy for gender equality, adopted in 2021, as well as major legislative reforms, have improved the protection of victims of gender-based violence, including expanding the legal definition of rape and criminalizing stalking. And this November, we will be launching a nationwide campaign against gender-based violence with a clear message that equality protects against violence. In our foreign policy, Switzerland is deeply committed to promoting universality of women's rights and gender equality, with a particular focus on women's economic and political participation and the fight against gender-based violence. Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, recent crises have set back the cause of gender equality. The progress we have achieved over the past few decades are now at risk in too many countries, but solutions have been formulated a long time ago, and they've been set out in various multilateral frameworks. Today, we need to build on that foundation and commit to putting it into practice. This is the surest path to protecting people and building societies that are truly equal and inclusive. Democracy and economic prosperity depend on it. Together, let us make the vision of Beijing a reality. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Netumbo Nandi Naitwa, President of the Republic of Namibia.
Madam President, gender equality and women empowerment have been key priorities for Namibia's government since our independence in 1990. We have shown strong political will through adopting international commitments, including the Beijing Declaration and the Platform of Action, which are domesticated in our national gender policy. 30 years ago in Beijing, we affirmed that women's rights were indeed human rights. Since then, Namibia has always built on the strong foundation of this declaration to draw a strong link on issues related to women and development and access. Our progress in the area of political inclusion and legal frame are grounded in this and underpinned our deep commitment to achieve progress for empowerment of women. As a result of this, Namibia closed 81.1% of its gender gap, ranking 8th globally and first in Africa as per the 2025 World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap reports. As President, I'm happy to highlight our historical milestone. Namibia now has a female president, vice president, Speaker of the National Assembly, and Secretary General of the SWAPO Party, the ruling party in Namibia. And women hold 57% of the cabinet, including key ministries such as finance, health, education, international relations, and trade. Madam President, as we reflect on our progress, we are also aware that our work is far from to be done. There are areas where there is room for improvement, particularly in the area of economics. In our national context, this is mainly in the area of economic inclusion of women in many economic activities such as mining, fishery, oil and gas, particularly rural women who still remain in the margin of the economic activities. Economic challenge persists across the many sectors, so much that we have to do a lot, particularly in the informal sector, to bring women to the par.
Madam President, thanks. I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Dina Ercilia Boluarte Segarra, President of the Republic of Peru.
Gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam President. 30 years have passed since we adopted the Declaration and Platform of Action of Beijing, a historic landmark that marked the most significant political commitment to achieve the empowerment of all women, adolescents and girls, and the full exercise of their human rights under conditions of equality. Since then, we have achieved some significant results. We have reduced the gap in access to education and the labour market. A growing number of women is getting access to decision-making fora, and we have strengthened norms in fighting violence and discrimination against women. Nevertheless, President, there are still structural gaps that are limiting the development of women and girls. Extreme poverty and multidimensional poverty, discrimination and violence continue to disproportionately affect us as women. And Peru is taking decisive action. In 2019, we approved our national gender equality policy. Its key objectives are to guarantee women the exercise of all of their rights, the eradication of violence against women, the empowerment of women so that we can overcome the institutional and socio-cultural barriers that women face. We have more than 400 emergency women's centres across the country, and they have an intercultural approach to deal with cases of violence against women so that we can put an end to this scourge. And we are using public funds to finance projects to support the economic independence of women. We have also taken steps to legally recognise the right to care and to create a national care system to guarantee this right. We're also accrediting and certifying the skills of care workers, many of whom are women.
We are working to guarantee women's access to quality education and also working to promote greater inclusion in the labour market and increasing women's participation at the political level and all levels of government. And I'm very proud to let you know that in 2023 we abolished child marriage. Madam President, as the first woman president, the interpreter apologises, the microphone does not appear to be working.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Madam President. Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias and
thank you very much.
Congratulations for being the first female president, and may I remind all speakers and maybe also all delegation to look at the script again. I'm very sorry for that one, but we have so many presidents and prime ministers speaking in a row. The next I may introduce is Her Excellency Natasha Pirc-Musar, President of the Republic of Slovenia.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, we need to face a difficult truth. Progress on gender equity has been uneven, and many of our hard-won gains are now at risk. Sexual and gender-based violence, economic inequality, a lack of sexual and reproductive rights, political underrepresentation, and the systemic discrimination of women persist. Real change requires making gender equity a genuine priority, including in peace and security. If not now, when? At a time when the world is facing a record number of conflicts. Conflicts that claim a devastating number of civilian lives, as in Gaza, where 2/3 of the victims are women and children. Simply put, the inclusion of women is a guarantee for peace. It is also high time that the UN's leadership reflects the diversity of the people it serves. This calls for bold action from all of us to nominate, support, and elect women to the highest offices, both here at the UN and in our own countries as well. After 80 years, the United Nations must lead by example. We cannot afford to miss yet another chance to appoint the first woman Secretary General, nor we can afford to move forward into a future where still only 6% of General Assembly presidents are women. Let me be clear. The issue has never been about merit. There are plenty smart and capable women. What is lacking is the will to open doors. Dear all, let us invest in women's leadership and ensure that every girl can live a life of opportunity. I know that women and girls in Afghanistan, Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti, and beyond are counting on us. And let me just conclude. My husband is a proud feminist. I am a proud feminist. And I am battling this battle not to say that the men need less. I'm not doing this for that. I just want the girls to have the same opportunities. And we need men to help us. And just to conclude with a couple of numbers, do you know how many presidents we have, female presidents we have in European Union? 2, in Malta and in Slovenia. Do you know how many presidents we have here in United Nations out of 193 members? 16. Those are the numbers. Thank you. And
I thank Her Excellency, Madam President, and again also congratulations to you being the first in that role. I give the floor now to His Excellency Daniel Francesco Chapo, President of the Republic of Mozambique.
Senhora Presidente.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, before my intervention, I would like to say that I am here in order to save the honor of men in the room, because since we've started, I just see women making the intervention. For that reason, I would like to say that we need to have men talking about this topic too. It's an honor to address this distinguished assembly. In a year, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action. On this occasion, I would like to reaffirm the unwavering commitment to the women empowerment of Mozambique. This is why the implementation of the agenda of Beijing, we have defined 2 priority areas for all girls and women, namely freedom of poverty through promoting access to reproductive resources and economic resources, zero violence, with a particular focus on eradication of femicide and all forms of gender-based violence. Your Excellencies, since Beijing, we have achieved gender parity in the Council of Ministers and in the Parliament. Almost 50% of the girls in the country are enrolled in all the levels of education. We have increased the number of institutional births from 48% to 65%. We have women in leadership position in the central organ of sovereignty, like the Prime Minister, the President of the Assembly of the Republic, the President of Constitutional Council, President of Administrative Courts, amongst other significant advances achieved in the local leadership. We have also created around 30 integrated centers to fight gender-based violence. We still face a lot of challenges. 44% of the girls are in early unions, 68% were victims of violence, and 27% of girls are still unemployed. Mindful of new frontiers of inequalities that are emerging with artificial intelligence and digital technologies that affect disproportionately the employment of women, Mozambique is integrating into the curriculum and promoting girls' access to science and technology,
Thank you, Mr. President. Obrigado, and I thank His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Mozambique. I give the floor now to Her Excellency Hilda Hein, President of the Republic of Marshall Islands.
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Yahweh. 30 years ago, Ambassador Nay John Edwards, now happily retired, led a delegation of Marshallese women to the Beijing Conference of Women. That conference changed her life and generations of Marshallese women ever since. Since the Beijing Declaration, gender is now a core pillar of our national planning. As a small island developing state, we are not moving fast enough with island-tailored strategies. In a nation where 1 out of 2 women experience violence, and in a Pacific Island region with the lowest rate of women in elected government in the world. Core efforts need to be strengthened, including in our families and communities. We can build on our traditional matrilineal customs to encourage the role of women as peace builders, as human rights defenders, and contemporary leaders in their fields. While the Marshall Islands has instituted important legal reforms, rates of gender-based violence remain unacceptably high. Education, police officer training, and crisis services have been key steps. We will continue to ensure the full recognition and realization of human rights for women and girls, including through our recent ratification of the Palermo Protocol on Trafficking. The health of women and girls is a key priority and is written in our survival story, where the nuclear legacy has left behind cancers, reproductive health struggles, and the unseen weight of caregiving. We answer this with urgency, expanding maternal care and family planning, and launching mass cervical cancer screening and prevention so that every woman and girls has the chance to live and to lead. Women's economic empowerment is vital to achieving equality. Through the Marshall Islands CAREF Fund, a national financing initiative that supports women's entrepreneurship and access to capital, we are opening pathways to women to drive innovation, recognizing when women prosper, nation prosper. Our national early childhood development framework has forged key progress in direct interventions to provide assistance, nutrition, and care for vulnerable communities, including expectant mothers and mothers of young children. This will be expanded for universal coverage to address crisis levels of malnutrition and stunting. We welcome the region's new policy launch to incorporate climate and resilience in the framework. Madam
I thank you, Madam President. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Gordana Siljanovska-Davkova, President of the Republic of North Macedonia.
Distinguished Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago, in Beijing, the nations of the world made a solemn pledge to advance women's rights and human rights, to achieve gender equality, and to empower every woman and girl to live free from violence, discrimination, and limitation. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action remain a cornerstone of international law, a living testament that equality for women is both justice and a prerequisite for peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. And yet, 3 decades on, we must admit progress has been uneven, fragile, and too often reversible. Violence against women persists with impunity, femicide desecrates the sanctity of life, and structural barriers still deny women leadership, resources, and decision-making power. These are not abstractions. They would wound families, societies, and generations. At the same time, the very institution created to safeguard peace, the United Nations, faces a profound crisis. Conceived as the greatest peace project of humankind, it is now stands against a backdrop of wars raging across continents. 80 years after its founding, peace, the raison d'etre of the UN, remain elusive. Mars still rules when it is time for Venus, embodied in the vision, compassion, and leadership of women to guide our common future. If we are serious about peace, then the time has come to entrust the helm of the United Nations to a woman. We, the women of the world, together with the children, are the first and greatest victims of war. But we are also the bearers of healing, compassion, and hope. Gender equality is not a feminist privilege. It is a humanist imperative. We do not ask for favors, not for matriarchy, but for a just order in which the talents and creativity of half of humanity are fully recognized for the advancement of politics, science, health, education, and peace. Excellencies, the Beijing Declaration called on us to ensure equal rights and equal access for women and men, girls and boys. That call remains urgent today. Only together, women and men, do we embody the full renew our commitment.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you. I thank you, Madam President. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Berjam Begay, President of the Republic of Albania.
Madam President, Excellencies, it's my pleasure to present at the commemoration of the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Conference an important platform in the global efforts for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Today serves as an opportunity to renew our collective commitment and to give fresh impetus to the full implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. We have made significant strides in ensuring women's participation in political, economic, and social life. Yet, with only 5 years left to achieve SDGs, progress on gender equality is stagnating and in some areas is regressing. We must reverse this trend. This meeting must serve as a turning point, moving beyond rhetoric to action. We must mobilize adequate financial resources, reinforce accountability frameworks, and invest in measurable and transformative actions. Albania is ready to share its experience. Over the past decade, we have undertaken substantial legal, institutional, and societal reforms aimed at promoting gender equality. Albania has closed the gender gap in education, strengthened women's economic participation, and invested in digital inclusion and entrepreneurship for women and girls. These reforms have been shaped in consultation with civil society and the youth, making gender equality an important aspect of our society. To us, gender equality is essential to sustainable development, social cohesion, and shared prosperity. Albania has pledged two priorities under the Beijing Plus 30 Action Agenda. First, to intensify efforts to eliminate violence against women, and second, to expand the application of gender-responsible budgeting. At a time when conflicts and crises are multiplying, the world needs the leadership and contribution of women more than ever. Their role is fundamental in building peace, preventing conflict, and creating more inclusive and resilient societies. Albania reaffirmed its full commitment to the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, to the 2030 Agenda, and to international human rights instruments. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency President of the Republic of Albania. I have the honor to give the floor to His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in all of your capacities. 30 years ago, the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action set out an ambitious roadmap to achieve gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. Today, as we mark this anniversary, we need to demonstrate clear-sightedness, determination, and a renewed commitment. Despite significant progress that has been achieved over recent decades, we see today alarming setbacks in women's rights. There are armed conflicts, the climate crises, and regressive movements which imperil our basic rights. Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted 25 years ago. It is a key landmark. When women participate in peace processes and are present at the negotiating table, the agreements that are the fruit of these negotiations are more inclusive, and peace is more likely to be attained and to be lasting. As part of our commitment to human rights and the dignity of every person, Monaco has always supported international efforts for advancing gender equality. Both on our soil and through international cooperation, the Principality has been working proactively to promote girls' access to education, women's economic empowerment and independence, as well as the fight against all forms of violence, including in conflict and crisis contexts. The Madagascar Committee for the Protection and Promotion of Women's Rights was established in 2018. Today, this is the cornerstone for mobilization and awareness at the national level. The government of our Principality is working closely with UN agencies such as UN Women and its Sport for Generation Equality framework, which recognizes the role of sports as key leverage towards social transformation. Monaco is proud of supporting this initiative. We believe that sports should be an engine for empowerment, for respect, and for solidarity. UNICEF and UNFPA are also key partners for our action through tangible projects. So these partnerships help to anchor the principles of the Beijing Declaration in actions on the ground. I also wish to highlight the key role of civil society, women leaders, young people, and male allies in building a world that is more just, with greater solidarity and greater equality. Our Principality reaffirms our commitment to continue along this path in a decisive way alongside all of those who work day by day to ensure that this equality becomes a reality. Thank you.
I thank His Serene Highness Prince Albert II of Monaco, Sovereign Prince of the Principality of Monaco. And I have the honor now to give the floor to His Excellency Assali Assoumani, President of the Union of the Comoros.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée.
Madam President of the General Assembly, honourable guests, ladies and gentlemen, Salam alaikum. It is a great honour and a real pleasure for me to take the floor on this solemn occasion of the 30th anniversary of the World Conference on Women. This anniversary is a time for us to take stock of the progress that has been made since the historic Beijing Conference in 1995, but also to highlight the achievements and best practices as well as the continuing challenges when it comes to promoting gender equality around the world. As we are faithful to our international and regional commitments, the Comoros has ratified a number of legal instruments that are relevant to the promotion and protection of women's rights, notably the prevention of all forms of discrimination against women. During the presidency of the Comoros of the African Union, we were proud to hold up the torch of this important cause, and on the 30th of October 1993, our country organized the third conference of consultation of women African leaders on the topic stimulating commitment towards the economic empowerment of women and putting an end to violence against women and girls. Nationally, we have always guaranteed women's rights by protecting them against violence, exploitation, and any form of violence. We have adopted a number of legislative instruments nationally, including the new penal code that makes provisions for the protection of women and children. And more recently, in 2024, we created a ministry dedicated to the promotion
of gender equality and training, and there is a woman heading that up. We have also established a national policy for gender equality, and we have developed mechanisms for medical, legal, and other support for victims of gender-based violence. And we also offer special support for women and girls who have been victims. The network of women African leaders is actively involved with local authorities. I have placed the promotion of women at the heart of our priorities, and today women hold positions of responsibility both within the government, the parliament, legal and judicial institutions, and other areas. The interpreter apologizes, the speaker's microphone has been cut off.
Excellency, Excellency, kindly conclude your statement. Oh my God. I know. I thank His Excellency, the President of the Union of Comoros, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, President of the Republic of Senegal.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President and General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank the President of the General Assembly and the Secretariat and the Secretary General for the invitation extended to participate in this meeting. We wish to recall the following. Pursuant to a call for action and mobilization for resources in order to accelerate progress towards full gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. The Beijing Program of Action has been a turning point when it comes to awareness about the obligation to have greater justice vis-a-vis all women. Progress has been achieved. However, this progress should be assessed on a regular basis in order to identify weaknesses, as well as to make the necessary adjustments to build a fairer and more inclusive society. The commitment to promotion of gender equality and the rights of women means that there is a need to fight against poverty, to guarantee women's access to economic resources, to education, to health care, as well as to enhance women's participation in decision-making bodies, as well as to protect them against all forms of violence and discrimination. This is what we have been doing in Senegal through our public policies and through the Senegal 2050 vision, which places women and young people at the very heart of national citizenship and stability. We have been implementing a progress accelerator to surmount the persistent obstacles to equality with programs which include expanding access for women and girls to education and training and combating unstintingly all gender-based violence. We are fighting against all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls, and this struggle needs to be continued with vigor in neither in religion, history, or any affiliation, or any argument can be made for women to be abused, discriminated against, or marginalized. All public bodies, members of civil society, religious and faith traditional leaders, all citizens have an obligation, more than ever before, to mobilize ourselves against brutality, against harassment, against rape, and against all forms of abuse. Together, let us surmount the persistent inequality. Let us work towards a greater partnership among states. Let us prepare future generations, succeeding generations, helping them to live in a fairer, more equal, and more harmonious world. This is a shared responsibility. This is a universal moral duty. I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency the President of Senegal, and I now give the floor to His Excellency Faustin Archange Touadéra, President of the Central African